As you become more familiar with using Max, you'll come to realize that the order in which you place your modifiers in the stack makes a big difference. Always remember that when making its calculations through whatever entries have been added into the modifier stack, Max always begins those calculations by starting at the bottom of the list and working its way up. That means that anything lower in the stack will affect the object it's been applied to before or prior to any entry above it. And however that modifier does change the object will carry over as to how any modifier above it changes that same applied to object. So it's kind of a cumulative effect, one thing building on the next. Now that's real important for you to remember. Each modifier you add in will have an effect on those that come after it, sometimes that effect being pretty substantial. So for an example, adding a stretch modifier before a bend modifier will yield a completely different result than if you had first applied the bend, then followed it up with the stretch. Reversing their order in the stack, in other words. We'll take a look at that here. This is a file named modifier order. You can find it in the working files folder. Let's select our object, then head over to the modify column in the command panel. We'll now enter the modifier list, adding a stretch modifier. Let's go ahead and adjust the stretch amount and see the effect it's having on the tube. To cancel out, I'll leave my left mouse down and right-click on the spinner. On top of the stretch, let's now add a bend. And to see that effect, we'll adjust that too. Changing the order of modifiers in the stack is easily done by simply drag and drop. Let's do this. Put your mouse on the name bend, click and hold down the mouse button. Now drag the name down below the name stretch. You'll specifically look for a blue line to show up between the stretch and tube entries. That's all there is to it. The two modifiers have switched order. Let's return things to the way they were, taking the stretch down below the bend. Okay, now on the stretch modifier, let's adjust its amount. We'll take the stretch value to 0.8. Let's now go up the stack to the bend and we'll change the bend angle to an even 180 degrees. Now again, over in the stack, take note of the modifier order. Max is basically saying, okay, I see you want to stretch the object, but only after I calculate that in will I bend it. Watch the way the object will radically change shape if we now drag the bend back below the stretch. Now, Max is looking how to calculate things completely different. Max is saying, I'll bend the tube, but only after doing so will I then work in the stretch. What makes your understanding of the modifier order so crucial is that you can actually have the right modifiers applied. But if they're not in the correct order, you're simply not going to get the results that you're expecting. So does the order that the modifier is positioned in the stack make a difference? You're darn right, and I think it's pretty obvious by just looking at the results in our scene. Let's now add another bend on top of the stack. Now to do that, we're going to have to go back and select the stretch. Now back in the list for the bend. Bending this modifier around to a negative value yields quite a different result. Just for kicks, let's see what happens if we take the stretch and drag it down below the first bend. After doing that, let's drop down to the tube and change a few values. I'll adjust both the radius 1 and 2 and also the height. So there's all kinds of fun stuff that you can do. So be real careful with the order in which you put your modifiers in the stack. And if you ever end up not getting the result you're looking for, consider simply switching the order of things in the list. It may very well be all you need to do. I'll go ahead and save this out as modifier order completed if you'd like to look it over.